What your soulmate said about marriage caught everyone off guard. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this fictional, faith-inspired story begins on a day that seemed completely ordinary, yet before the sun had set, one unexpected conversation would leave everyone speechless. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. Somewhere, your soulmate sat quietly among family and close friends as the conversation slowly turned toward the subject of marriage. At first, everyone laughed, shared stories, and spoke about weddings they had attended over the years. It felt like a simple gathering filled with familiar faces. No one imagined that one honest answer would completely change the atmosphere of the room. For a long time, your soulmate had remained unusually quiet whenever marriage became the topic of discussion. Some believed they simply weren't interested. Others assumed they were waiting for the perfect circumstances. A few quietly wondered whether they had given up on the idea altogether. But the truth was very different. Deep inside, your soulmate had been growing through a season of reflection that very few people knew about. God had been teaching lessons that could only be learned through patience, humility, forgiveness, and quiet faith. Don't skip because something beautiful is waiting for you. As the conversation continued, one family member smiled and asked, "So, when will you finally decide to get married?" The room became unexpectedly quiet. Every eye turned toward your soulmate, waiting for the familiar answer that usually avoided the question. Instead, after a brief moment of thoughtful silence, they gently smiled and said something no one expected. "I no longer believe marriage is about finding a perfect person." The room fell completely silent. Those simple words surprised everyone because they were unlike anything your soulmate had ever shared before. Listen carefully. This changes everything. After another peaceful pause, they continued speaking with honesty and calm confidence. "I used to believe marriage depended on perfect timing, perfect circumstances, and perfect people. But God has shown me something different. Marriage is not about perfection. It's about two imperfect hearts choosing faithfulness every single day. It's about learning to forgive before resentment grows, choosing kindness before pride speaks, and remaining honest even when difficult conversations become necessary. The strongest marriages are not built because life is easy. They are built because both people keep choosing love, respect, patience, and grace when life becomes challenging." No one interrupted. Every person quietly listened. Even those who usually had something to say simply remained still. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. One older relative looked at your soulmate with tears beginning to form and softly said, "I've been married for over 40 years, and those words may be the wisest I've heard in a long time." Another family member lowered their head, reflecting on mistakes they wished they had handled differently. Others quietly realized they had spent years chasing unrealistic expectations instead of building the character necessary for lasting commitment. Meanwhile, your own fictional journey continued quietly, completely unaware that this conversation was taking place. You continued living with the same integrity that had shaped every previous chapter of your story. You chose honesty when no one was watching. You offered encouragement without expecting recognition. You forgave quickly instead of holding on to bitterness. Day after day, those simple choices shaped your character in ways you couldn't always see. Unknown to you, they were the very qualities your soulmate had come to value most deeply. Don't skip because something huge is waiting for you. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, your soulmate stepped outside beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The cool evening air carried a peaceful silence. Looking upward, they whispered a heartfelt prayer. Lord, thank you for changing my understanding of love. Thank you for teaching me that commitment begins with character. Help me become the kind of person who reflects patience, humility, honesty, compassion, and faith. Prepare my heart to encourage rather than control, to forgive rather than condemn, and to serve rather than seek recognition. Whatever the future holds, let every decision honor you. A deep peace settled over their heart. Returning inside, your soulmate opened a journal that had accompanied them through many seasons of growth. Slowly, they wrote. Today I realize that marriage is not the reward for finding someone perfect. It is the opportunity for two people to grow together with God's guidance. A lasting relationship is built through thousands of ordinary choices, speaking kindly, listening carefully, forgiving quickly, praying faithfully, and encouraging one another through every season. Real love is not measured by one unforgettable moment. It is measured by everyday faithfulness. Closing the journal, they smiled with quiet gratitude. For the first time in many years, thoughts about the future no longer created fear. They created hope. God had replaced uncertainty with peace and unrealistic expectations with wisdom. My beloved child, don't skip because the next chapter will reveal the surprising conversation your soulmate has with someone they trust most. During that conversation, they will openly share the qualities they have quietly been praying for, and everyone present will be amazed to discover how closely those hopes reflect the kind of person God has been shaping throughout this fictional journey. The conversation that revealed their true heart ***. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this fictional, faith-inspired story now reaches a chapter where quiet thoughts are finally spoken aloud. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. The morning after that unforgettable family gathering, your soulmate awoke with an unusual sense of peace. For the first time in many years, they no longer felt pressured by other people's expectations. The conversation from the previous evening remained fresh in their mind, but instead of worrying about how others had reacted, they felt grateful that they had finally spoken honestly. As sunlight gently filled the room, they opened the curtains and watched the world slowly come to life. The ordinary beauty of the morning reminded them that God often works quietly. Just as the sunrise never rushes, the most meaningful seasons of life unfold one faithful step at a time. Looking back over previous years, your soulmate realized that every delay had served a purpose. Every unanswered prayer had strengthened patience. Every disappointment had produced wisdom. Every difficult season had quietly transformed their understanding of love, commitment, and faith. Don't skip because something beautiful is waiting for you. Later that day, your soulmate met with someone they deeply respected, an older mentor who had been married for many years. After sharing a meal together, the mentor smiled warmly and asked, "I've heard your answer about marriage surprised quite a few people yesterday. Tell me, what has changed inside your heart?" Your soulmate paused thoughtfully before answering. For a long time, they said quietly, I believed marriage was something you reached after everything else in life became perfect. I thought I needed complete certainty before taking any step forward. But God has shown me that certainty doesn't build strong relationships. Character does. The mentor nodded with understanding, encouraging them to continue. Listen carefully. This changes everything. Your soulmate continued speaking with complete honesty. I've learned that I don't want a relationship built only on exciting emotions. I want one built on daily faithfulness. I want conversations where truth is spoken with kindness. I want disagreements that end with forgiveness instead of pride. I want two people who encourage each other to grow closer to God through every season. I don't expect perfection anymore because I know neither of us will ever be perfect. I simply hope for two hearts willing to keep choosing grace every single day. The mentor smiled and quietly replied, "Those words tell me something important. You're no longer searching for someone to complete your life. You're preparing to walk beside someone with humility, patience, and faith. That is the foundation upon which lasting marriages are built." Those words settled deeply into your soulmate's heart. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. As they walked home later that afternoon, your soulmate reflected on the conversation again and again. They realized that the greatest preparation for marriage was never about planning a ceremony or imagining the future. It was about becoming the kind of person who could remain loving during difficult seasons, patient during delays, grateful during ordinary days, and faithful when life became uncertain. Meanwhile, your own fictional journey continued with the same quiet consistency that had always guided you. You continued choosing honesty over convenience, forgiveness over resentment, generosity over selfishness, and hope over fear. Those choices rarely attracted attention, yet they quietly shaped your character every single day. Unknown to you, those were the very qualities your soulmate had been describing during every conversation. Don't skip because something huge is waiting for you. That evening, your soulmate opened the journal once again. They slowly turned the pages filled with memories from previous chapters of life. Earlier entries reflected uncertainty, fear, and unanswered questions. The newest pages reflected gratitude, wisdom, and growing faith. On a blank page they carefully wrote, "Today I realize that preparing for marriage begins long before meeting the right person. It begins by allowing God to shape my own heart. Every act of patience becomes preparation. Every decision to forgive becomes preparation. Every lesson in humility becomes preparation. If I want a relationship built on truth, then I must first become a person who consistently lives by truth." As they finished writing, tears quietly filled their eyes, not because of sadness, but because of gratitude. They finally understood that God had been answering prayers in ways they had never expected. The waiting had never been punishment. It had been preparation. Later that night, beneath a sky filled with countless stars, your soulmate whispered another quiet prayer. "Lord, thank you for teaching me that lasting love is not built through perfect moments but through faithful hearts. Continue shaping me into someone who listens before speaking, forgives before resentment grows, serves before seeking recognition, and loves with humility rather than pride. Help me trust your timing instead of my own." A peaceful silence followed that prayer. For the first time in many years, they no longer feared the future. Whatever chapter came next would be guided by faith instead of anxiety, by wisdom instead of haste, and by hope instead of uncertainty. My beloved child, don't skip, because the next chapter will reveal the unexpected moment when your soulmate describes the kind of future they hope to build one day. Those listening will be surprised, not because of wealth, success, or grand dreams, but because of the simple, timeless values they now believe create the strongest and happiest marriages. The future they described left everyone speechless. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this fictional, faith-inspired story now reaches a chapter where quiet dreams are finally spoken aloud. Stay until the very end, because what happened next changed everything. A few days after the heartfelt conversation with their mentor, your soulmate was invited to another family gathering. The atmosphere was warm and peaceful. Laughter filled the room as relatives shared meals, remembered old stories, and talked about their hopes for the future. No one expected that another simple question would lead to a conversation that every person present would remember for years to come. As everyone sat together around the table, one younger family member smiled and asked, "If you could describe your future marriage in just a few words, what would it look like?" The room became surprisingly quiet. Everyone looked toward your soulmate, curious to hear what they would say after everything they had shared during the previous gathering. Your soulmate smiled gently before answering. "I don't dream about a perfect wedding," they began softly. "I dream about ordinary mornings where two people thank God for another day together. I dream about peaceful conversations after difficult days. I dream about a home where forgiveness is quicker than anger, where encouragement is spoken more often than criticism, and where faith remains stronger than fear." The room grew completely silent. Don't skip, because something beautiful is waiting for you. They continued speaking with calm confidence. "I hope for a marriage where both people continue learning instead of pretending they already know everything. I hope we celebrate each other's victories without jealousy and carry each other's burdens without complaining. I hope we laugh often, pray together during difficult seasons, and never become too proud to say, 'I'm sorry,' or 'thank you.' I don't believe happiness comes from having a perfect life. I believe it comes from two people choosing kindness every single day." Several people quietly lowered their heads, reflecting on those words. Listen carefully. This changes everything. One elderly grandmother smiled with tears in her eyes and softly said, "That reminds me of the marriage your grandfather and I shared. We weren't perfect. We simply refused to stop choosing each other, even when life became difficult." The room remained peaceful as everyone listened. Another relative quietly admitted, "We've spent so much time planning celebrations that we sometimes forget to prepare our hearts." Those simple words touched everyone present. Meanwhile, your own fictional journey continued exactly as it always had. You continued living with honesty, humility, and quiet faithfulness. You helped others without expecting recognition. You remained patient when circumstances became difficult and chose compassion instead of judgment. You never imagined that somewhere, someone was describing the very qualities that had slowly become part of your daily life. Stay until the very end, because what happened next changed everything. After the gathering ended, your soulmate took a peaceful walk beneath the evening sky. The stars slowly appeared above, reminding them once again that God's greatest work often happens quietly. Looking upward, they whispered a heartfelt prayer. Lord, thank you for changing my definition of love. Help me never chase appearances more than character. Teach me to build every future relationship upon honesty, patience, forgiveness, humility, and faith. Prepare me to become a blessing to others before asking for blessings for myself. Let my life reflect your peace wherever I go. As they finished praying, an incredible sense of peace settled upon their heart. Don't skip because something huge is waiting for you. Returning home, your soulmate opened the journal once again. On a fresh page they slowly wrote, "Today I realize that the strongest marriages are built long before the wedding day. They are built through daily habits of kindness. They are strengthened through honest conversations, humble apologies, patient understanding, faithful prayers, and the courage to keep loving when life becomes difficult. Marriage is not the finish line of love. It is the beginning of two hearts learning to grow together under God's guidance." Closing the journal, they smiled with quiet gratitude. The future no longer seemed uncertain because they understood something they had never fully understood before. God's greatest preparation had never been arranging perfect circumstances. It had been shaping two hearts capable of walking through every season with grace. As the evening grew still, your soulmate reflected on one final thought before going to sleep. If God has spent this much time preparing my heart, then perhaps He is also preparing someone else's heart with the same patience, wisdom, and love. That thought filled them with hope unlike anything they had experienced before. My beloved child, don't skip because the next chapter will reveal the unforgettable moment when your soulmate courageously shares why they believe God's timing is always better than human timing, leaving everyone who hears their testimony deeply encouraged and filled with renewed faith. Why they finally trusted God's timing. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this fictional, faith-inspired story now reaches the chapter where your soulmate discovers that every delay carried a purpose they could never have imagined. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. A few days after speaking with their mentor, your soulmate was invited to a small gathering at a quiet countryside home. Friends and family spent the evening sharing stories about life's unexpected journeys, the lessons they had learned through hardship, and the blessings that often arrived long after they had almost given up hope. As laughter filled the room and candles softly illuminated the table, someone turned toward your soulmate with a thoughtful smile and asked, "If you could go back in time, would you change anything about the way your life unfolded?" The room became completely silent. Everyone expected them to speak about missed opportunities, painful memories, or seasons of waiting. Instead, your soulmate smiled peacefully before answering. "I used to pray for God to change my circumstances," they began softly. "Now I thank Him for changing my heart." Those words immediately captured everyone's attention. Don't skip because something beautiful is waiting for you. Your soulmate continued, "There was a time when I believed every closed door meant God had forgotten me. Every delay felt like disappointment, and every unanswered prayer felt like silence. I questioned why things were taking so long. I compared my journey to everyone else's. I wondered if I had somehow missed God's plan. But looking back today, I realized something I couldn't understand back then." They paused for a moment before continuing. If those doors had opened too early, I wouldn't have been ready to walk through them. God wasn't keeping blessings away from me. He was preparing me to receive them with wisdom, humility, and gratitude. Several people quietly nodded. Listen carefully. This changes everything. One friend asked, "So what changed your perspective?" Your soulmate smiled gently. I stopped asking, "Why am I waiting?" and started asking, "What is God teaching me while I wait?" That single question changed everything. During those seasons I learned patience instead of rushing. I learned forgiveness instead of bitterness. I learned gratitude instead of complaining. Most importantly, I learned that becoming the right person is just as important as hoping to meet the right person. The room remained completely still. An elderly couple sitting nearby exchanged warm smiles. The husband quietly said, "After 45 years of marriage, I can tell you that's exactly what sustained us." Love grows stronger when two people continue allowing God to shape their hearts. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. Later that evening, after the gathering had ended, your soulmate took a slow walk beneath the stars. The peaceful night reminded them of every prayer they had whispered during lonely seasons. They remembered the nights they had cried, the mornings they had questioned their future, and the countless moments when they wondered if anything was changing at all. Looking back now, they could finally see what had been hidden all along. Every disappointment had taught compassion. Every delay had produced wisdom. Every unanswered question had strengthened faith. Every difficult season had quietly built the character they now carried with confidence. Meanwhile, your own fictional journey continued with the same quiet faithfulness. You continued encouraging others, speaking honestly, serving without expecting recognition, and trusting God through ordinary days. Unknown to you, your life reflected the same lessons your soulmate had been learning. Though your paths had unfolded differently, both stories had been shaped by the same patient hand of God, preparing each heart one faithful day at a time. Don't skip because something huge is waiting for you. Returning home, your soulmate opened the familiar journal once again. On a fresh page they slowly wrote, "Tonight I finally understand that God's timing is never about making us wait without purpose. His timing is about preparing our hearts for what He already sees ahead." The greatest gift was never simply reaching the next chapter. The greatest gift was becoming someone capable of living that chapter with faith, humility, patience, honesty, and love. If God had answered every prayer the moment I asked, I would have missed the lessons that transformed my life. As they finished writing, they gently closed the journal and looked out the window. A quiet smile appeared on their face, not because every question had been answered, but because they had learned to trust the one who holds every tomorrow. Before resting for the night, they whispered one final prayer. "Lord, thank you for every season that shaped my heart. Continue teaching me to trust you even when I cannot see the full picture. Let my future be built upon faith instead of fear, kindness instead of pride, and hope instead of doubt. Help me become a blessing wherever you lead me." A deep peace filled the room. For the first time, your soulmate no longer measured life by how quickly prayers were answered. They measured it by how faithfully God had walked beside them through every season. "My beloved child, Don't skip because the next chapter will reveal the unforgettable conversation where your soulmate shares the one promise they hope to make in a future marriage, a promise so simple, yet so meaningful, that everyone listening is left deeply moved by its sincerity. The promise that began a beautiful new season ****. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this is the final chapter of this fictional, faith-inspired journey. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. The evening arrived wrapped in extraordinary peace. The sky glowed with soft shades of gold before slowly fading into deep blue, and countless stars quietly appeared overhead. Your soulmate stood outside for a moment, reflecting on every chapter that had brought them to this point. They remembered the seasons of waiting, the unanswered questions, the moments of doubt, and the prayers whispered when no one else could hear. Looking back, they realized that every step, even the difficult ones, had been guiding them toward greater faith, wisdom, and gratitude. The following weekend, family and close friends gathered once again for a simple dinner filled with laughter, conversation, and thankfulness. The atmosphere felt different than before. There was no pressure, no expectations, and no endless questions about the future. Instead, everyone simply enjoyed being together. As the evening continued, one young cousin smiled and asked your soulmate, "If God blesses you with marriage one day, what is the very first promise you hope to make?" The room became completely silent. Everyone waited patiently. Your soulmate smiled warmly before answering. "My first promise will not be about perfect days," they said gently. "It will be that no matter what season life brings, I will choose kindness before anger, honesty before fear, forgiveness before resentment, and faith before doubt. I want every decision we make to reflect God's love rather than our pride. I know we will both make mistakes, but I also know that God's grace teaches us how to begin again." Those words touched every heart in the room. Don't skip because something beautiful is waiting for you. An elderly couple who had shared more than 50 years of marriage quietly smiled at one another. The husband softly said, "That promise is stronger than any grand speech because it can be lived every single day." His wife nodded with tears of gratitude and added, "The happiest marriages are not the ones without difficulties. They are the ones where two people never stop choosing patience, humility, and love." Their words filled the room with peaceful reflection. Meanwhile, your own fictional journey continued in quiet faithfulness. You never sought recognition for the kindness you showed or the encouragement you offered. You simply trusted God one day at a time, believing that every season had a purpose. Though you did not know it, the values your soulmate described were the same values shaping your own heart. Different paths had prepared both of you in remarkably similar ways. Each lesson, each challenge, and each answered prayer had become another step toward greater compassion and deeper faith. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. Later that evening, after everyone had returned home, your soulmate opened the familiar journal for one final entry. Slowly, they wrote, "Tonight I finally understand that marriage is not the reward waiting at the end of life. It is another beginning. A journey where two imperfect people choose to grow together with God at the center of every season. Real love is not measured by extraordinary moments alone. It is revealed through everyday faithfulness, gentle words, humble hearts, patient listening, honest conversations, and quiet acts of service. If I continue becoming the person God is calling me to be, then every future chapter will be built upon a foundation that cannot easily be shaken. After writing those final words, they gently closed the journal and placed it beside the window. Looking toward the stars, they whispered one last prayer. Lord, thank you for every lesson you have taught me. Thank you for every delay that became preparation, every challenge that strengthened my character, and every blessing that reminded me of your faithfulness. Continue leading my steps with wisdom. Help me remain humble in success, faithful in waiting, compassionate toward others, and grateful for every new day you provide. A deep and lasting peace filled the room. As the first light of morning slowly appeared on the horizon, your soulmate stepped outside with a renewed heart. The future no longer felt uncertain because they had learned that true peace does not come from knowing every detail of tomorrow. It comes from trusting the one who faithfully walks beside us through every chapter. My beloved child, as this fictional story comes to its close, remember this simple truth: the strongest relationships are built one faithful day at a time. They grow through forgiveness offered freely, truth spoken with kindness, patience practiced during difficult seasons, and hope that remains steady even when the road ahead cannot be fully seen. God's work often unfolds quietly, shaping hearts before changing circumstances, teaching us that the greatest blessing is not simply reaching a destination but becoming people who reflect His love wherever we go. And so this story ends with peace instead of fear, gratitude instead of regret, and hope instead of uncertainty. The waiting became preparation. The questions became wisdom. The prayers became quiet strength. As a new sunrise welcomed a fresh beginning, every heart walked forward with confidence, trusting that God would continue writing beautiful chapters filled with faith, compassion, integrity, and love. Sometimes the happiest ending is simply discovering that the best chapters are still being written, one faithful step at a time.